Millions of investors devastated by the largest financial scandal in crypto history.
This isn't just a disaster for investors. It's a global crisis of trust.
I was one of them. I worked to build this. I believed what they told us, until I found the truth.
We are revolutionizing global finance. There are no limits to what we can achieve together.
The outrage is widespread. Everyday investors have lost everything and are demanding answers.
They said it was safe. I lost my entire life savings.
At first it was just numbers. Anomalies too small to notice. But then the numbers became faces. And the faces? They became stories of loss and despair. And me? I was trapped between the truth and silence. Speaking out meant losing everything. But pretending nothing was wrong, that would make me complicit. What would you do if you discovered that the financial future was on the brink of collapse?
The empire seemed unshakable, until now. Uncover the truth they tried to hide.
Victor Zhou, better known as VZ, emerged as a charismatic and innovative figure during the cryptocurrency boom. The son of hard-working immigrants in an industrial city, Zhou faced financial hardship from a young age, but used his sharp intellect and resilience to teach himself programming. Armed with only a backpack and a laptop, he traveled across countries, seeking his place in the global tech landscape. Zhou also mastered social media, posting bold statements and detailed threads that challenged regulators, captivated young investors, and solidified his image as a visionary leader. One of his most viral posts read, "Cryptocurrency isn't the future. It's the present and you're already behind." When Zhou founded Finexium, he positioned the company as the vanguard of a financial revolution, one that transcended traditional regulatory boundaries. Initially based in Dubai, a haven for loose financial regulations, Finexium quickly became known for its agility in shifting jurisdictions to avoid legal restrictions. According to Zhou, this strategy was crucial to ensuring financial freedom in a world of outdated bureaucracies. In speeches and interviews, Zhou often declared, "Traditional laws can't keep up with innovation, and we can't wait for them to catch up." Under Zhou's leadership, Finexium expanded aggressively into other regulatory havens, capitalizing on tax incentives and legal loopholes to grow exponentially. Its intuitive interface and competitive fees made Finexium the preferred choice for both small investors and major corporations. For many, Zhou represented a break from the constraints of antiquated financial systems. But behind Finexium's polished facade lay a web of opaque operations that defied scrutiny. On the other side of the story was Samuel Kane, a recently promoted financial analyst at Finexium. Ambitious yet principled, Kane admired Zhou's innovation and boldness. Working for Finexium was every finance professional's dream. The company offered cutting-edge technology, a dynamic work environment, and, of course, lucrative salaries. Initially captivated by Finexium's promise of innovation, Kane soon began noticing irregularities. During a routine audit, he uncovered frequent transfers to accounts in jurisdictions notorious for lax financial oversight. These transactions were obscured by vague labels such as operational reimbursements and innovation consulting. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became that these patterns pointed to a deliberate effort to obscure the origin and destination of funds. Internal documents revealed troubling discrepancies, but when Kane pressed his supervisors for answers, he was met with evasions or outright deflections. At first, he attributed these inconsistencies to the complexities of global transactions. Yet, his intuition and experience told him otherwise. This was no mere oversight. Meanwhile, Dubai, a city notorious for its flexible regulations, had become a global hotspot for tech startups and financial firms seeking to operate beyond the constraints of major economies. International regulators, however, were beginning to question the cost of this unchecked freedom. Suspicions about Finexium's operations soon reached the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Investigating Finexium's sprawling global transactions was a logistical nightmare. Employing forensic analysts and collaborating with international banks, the SEC started tracing financial flows through decentralized digital banking networks. Many of these trails disappeared into jurisdictions without information sharing agreements, forcing the agency to find legal loopholes to advance its probe. These transactions often ended in accounts based in tax havens notorious for their leniency on money laundering. Preliminary findings revealed a sophisticated network designed not just to exploit regulatory gaps, but to deliberately mask the origins of suspicious funds. Zhou, meanwhile, carefully cultivated his public image as a champion of financial decentralization. In strategically orchestrated interviews and fiery social media posts, he lashed out at regulators. They want to delay innovation because they fear the future. He pointed to outdated regulations as justification for his defiant stance. Behind closed doors, however, Zhou prepared a narrative in case the investigations escalated. He anticipated attacks and crafted responses to exploit investor trust in decentralized systems. In one globally trending post, Zhou declared, "Regulations are tools designed to protect banking monopolies. We're here to tear down those barriers." This polarizing rhetoric made him a hero among crypto enthusiasts, but also painted a massive target on his back for regulators worldwide. As pressure mounted, Zhou imposed extreme control measures within Finexium. Internal systems logged every access and download, and meetings once open to multiple teams were now restricted to a select group of executives. Zhou personally oversaw damage control strategies, but his abrupt operational changes sparked rumors among employees, many of whom feared for their positions and their safety. Kane noticed a troubling pattern. Long-standing leaders at Finexium were quietly disappearing, their departures never formally announced. Whispers of hurried non-disclosure agreements and generous severance packages circulated through the office halls. The atmosphere became even more tense when Kane's access to key documents was abruptly revoked. During a major event where Zhou announced new partnerships with his trademark Confidence, Kane caught a glimpse of unease in the eyes of certain directors, as though they sensed the inevitable collapse of the House of Cards. Late one night, while combing through internal emails, Kane stumbled upon an encrypted attachment, accessible only with administrative credentials. It detailed multi-million-dollar transfers to shell companies in tax havens. Cross-referencing the data with a financial analysis software, Kane identified suspicious patterns tied to these transactions. One name stood out, Aurora Consulting. Frequently mentioned in internal contracts, it had no clear purpose. All signs pointed to Aurora being a front for laundering illicit funds. Alone in his office, surrounded by confidential documents, Kane felt the weight of his discovery. Reporting this could jeopardize his career, his safety, and possibly his life. Yet staying silent meant enabling a scheme that could harm countless others. What matters more? Kane wondered, staring at the papers and his exhausted reflection on the computer screen. That night, Kane worked late, carefully accessing data through temporary passwords he had painstakingly obtained. He knew every click risked triggering alarms within Finexium's security system. Outside, Dubai's skyline gleamed silently, its lights flickering like a foreboding signal. Elsewhere, Victor Zhou raised a glass with investors at a lavish event, radiating confidence. Though aware of the growing rumors, Zhou dismissed them as yet another temporary storm, one he could outmaneuver with calculated strategies. Storms come and go, but an empire like ours needs crisis-proof tactics, he told his team, reviewing a list of assets at risk. Zhou hesitated momentarily over reports of escalating investigations, but swiftly ordered funds to be rerouted through less scrutinized accounts, using a labyrinth of anonymous intermediaries. Yet, even his closest executives couldn't miss the tension in his voice. Will Kane succumb to pressure or fight for the truth? What secrets is Zhou hiding? How will the investigations impact Finexium's fate? Victor Zhou was more than just a founder. He was the architect of an empire that redefined the global cryptocurrency market. From the outset, Zhou understood that Finexium's success depended on a trifecta of accessibility, innovation, and public perception. He cultivated an image of authenticity, a hands-on leader, active on social media, and a vocal advocate for decentralization. Finexium thrived, offering low fees and an intuitive platform that drew millions of users worldwide. Its soaring profits funded massive advertising campaigns, lavish headquarters, and strategic partnerships. Yet behind the gleaming facade lay a labyrinth of subsidiaries, shadowy contracts, and opaque financial systems. Dubai played a crucial role in this meteoric rise. With its business-friendly regulations, the city became a haven for companies eager to innovate without the constraints of traditional oversight. Zhou exploited these advantages to the fullest, but the cost of this unchecked freedom was beginning to surface. For Samuel Kane, joining Finexium was a career-defining moment. After years as a financial analyst for traditional firms stifled by bureaucracy, he saw Finexium as a front-row seat to revolutionizing the financial world. But as time went on, Kane started noticing the gap between the company's public image and its behind-the-scenes operations. With his privileged access to financial and operational data, Kane was uniquely positioned to spot patterns, and troubling ones began to emerge. While analyzing Finexium's customer capital flows, Kane stumbled upon an intriguing trend. A significant number of transactions converged into accounts based in minimally regulated countries. At first, he assumed this was due to legitimate uses of cryptocurrency to avoid excessive fees. But the sheer volume and frequency of these transactions were alarming. Dubai's unique environment only fueled Kane's suspicions. Renowned for its gleaming skyscrapers and cutting-edge infrastructure, the city marketed itself as a global financial innovation hub, attracting startups with the promise of freedom to innovate. Critics, however, noted that this regulatory flexibility often bordered on negligent oversight. Finexium thrived in this ecosystem. Local banks tailored services specifically for cryptocurrency exchanges, and a new financial elite rose rapidly in the city. However, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, was growing increasingly concerned about the global impact of such practices. Dubai was fast becoming a haven for financial schemes, drawing scrutiny from regulators and investigative journalists alike. As Kane delved deeper, he couldn't shake his curiosity about Victor Zhou. Zhou's remarkable rise from self-taught programmer to global icon should have been exemplary, but something felt off. Old records revealed a financial dispute that predated Finexium's founding. Yet, the details were obscured by non-disclosure agreements, leaving more questions than answers. This discovery deepened Kane's suspicion that Zhou's success might be built on darker secrets. Publicly, Zhou continued to shine as an inspiring leader. He delivered speeches on the power of decentralization, graced magazine covers, and sponsored global tech conferences. To Kane, however, Zhou's duality was evident in subtle ways. Behind closed doors, Zhou was methodical and calculating, delegating risky tasks to subordinates while avoiding direct involvement. On stage, he captivated audiences with impassioned rhetoric, drawing in institutional investors with promises of a financial revolution. This ability to oscillate between charisma and manipulation made it difficult to discern where the visionary ended and the ruthless strategist began. During his investigations, Kane uncovered connections between Aurora Consulting and Helios Network, another entity with equally obscure records. Internal reports claimed Helios provided blockchain infrastructure, but its revenues didn't align with the services it supposedly offered. A deeper dive revealed that Helios had no registered employees, suggesting it existed to mask massive financial transactions under the guise of legitimate operations. When Kane raised his concerns with a supervisor, he was dismissed with a casual, "We're building the future, Kane. Compliance shouldn't stand in the way of innovation." Behind the scenes, Zhou maintained a deliberately opaque system, creating the illusion of legal compliance while funneling billions to offshore accounts through shell entities like Aurora. Aurora Consulting and Helios Network, both registered in small offices in Dubai and the Caribbean, were key intermediaries. Their contracts outlined vague services such as strategic consulting and infrastructure support, while financial records showed massive transfers to untraceable recipients. Kane discovered that these companies were linked to buildings housing multiple shell entities, hallmarks of money laundering schemes. Even more unsettling were the confidentiality clauses in Aurora's contracts, hinting at its role as a front for illicit financial activities. As Kane sought further access to internal records, he found his permissions restricted to a closed circle of executives. In internal meetings, Kane began noticing unusual behavior among his superiors. Discussions around financial matters were unusually cautious, and on several occasions, conversations abruptly ended when he entered the room. His unease grew as the signs of wrongdoing multiplied. Meanwhile, SEC analysts were connecting the dots, suspecting Finexium was at the heart of a global money laundering operation. The scheme was intricate. Funds were funneled through Dubai banks, then layered across anonymous digital wallets, making them nearly impossible to trace. This method, known as layering, created a smokescreen that concealed the origin and ultimate destination of the funds. For regulators, unraveling this financial maze was a daunting task. Kane, combing through internal data, was stunned to discover that some of these funds were tied to entities created solely to obscure the identities of their true beneficiaries. At the same time, media leaks began raising questions about Finexium's transparency. Zhou, undeterred, delivered a defiant speech widely broadcasted. This is nothing more than an outdated attempt to stop the inevitable transformation cryptocurrencies represent. He used the moment to reaffirm his commitment to decentralization while branding regulators as enemies of progress. His followers amplified this narrative online, even as institutional investors adopted a more cautious stance. For Kane, who had seen the truth behind the numbers, every word from Zhou felt like an elaborate facade. Will Kane find allies to expose Finexium's activities? What is Aurora Consulting's true role, and how does it connect to Zhou? Can the SEC gather enough evidence before Zhou uncovers their intentions? The next move could change everything. The weeks that followed threw Samuel Kane into a whirlwind of uncertainties. He was certain something was deeply wrong at Finexium, but proving it was a challenge far greater than he anticipated. His discovery of Aurora Consulting became an obsession. Tracing the company led him to a small office in Dubai, a nondescript building in the financial district, devoid of signs or markings which only added to the intrigue. As Kane worked to uncover Aurora's role, another mystery emerged. During a late-night analysis, he stumbled upon a series of transactions tied to accounts associated with an entity called Helios Network. Officially, Helios provided blockchain infrastructure for Finexium's clients, but the numbers didn't add up. These transactions lacked clear justification and involved sums far too substantial for standard operational contracts. Publicly, Victor Zhou faced mounting pressure. Media reports, fueled by anonymous sources, hinted that Finexium might be hiding billions in offshore accounts. Zhou, ever the tactician, used his charisma to divert attention. At an international tech conference, he delivered a passionate speech accusing regulators of stifling innovation to protect traditional monopolies. Still, some investors began to grow uneasy. Alistair Vaughan, one of Zhou's earliest and most prominent backers, demanded a private meeting. Concerned about the rumors, Vaughan sought assurances that his fortune was safe. Zhou assured him that the allegations were baseless and that Finexium would emerge stronger than ever. Behind closed doors at Finexium, tensions were rising. Kane started noticing signs he was being watched. Files he had reviewed appeared to be moved or altered, and his presence in internal meetings was met with suspicion. One supervisor, passing him in the hallway, made a seemingly offhand remark laced with warning. Some people have trouble distinguishing where curiosity ends and danger begins. The atmosphere of surveillance only deepened Kane's resolve. He knew he needed help, but trusting anyone within Finexium was a gamble. When investigative journalist Julia Marks approached him discreetly, he saw a potential lifeline. Julia had been tracking Finexium for months and had her own sources, but she needed hard evidence. Marks was direct. "You're surrounded, Kane. I know you've noticed. But if they realize what you're up to, you're in serious danger." She handed him a secure, encrypted flash drive. "I have contacts who can protect you, but we need more proof. If you can dig up something concrete, we can expose this before they cover their tracks." Kane hesitated, the weight of his decision palpable. He knew every step toward the truth would push him further from any semblance of normalcy. Sharing information would jeopardize his career and possibly his life. But the pressure was mounting, and the puzzle pieces were aligning to reveal something far larger than he ever imagined. Meanwhile, Victor Zhou faced crises on multiple fronts. Regulators in Dubai escalated their investigations. Several countries began freezing accounts linked to Finexium, citing compliance concerns. Zhou gathered his inner circle for an emergency meeting in a private conference room. "These attacks won't bring us down, but we need absolute precision," he said, gesturing to a digital map highlighting accounts across continents. He ordered staggered transfers to hard-to-trace platforms such as crypto mixers and decentralized exchanges to obscure the final destinations of funds. "It'll take them months to catch up," he added, his voice firm but tinged with tension. "This isn't a crisis, it's a war, and I intend to win." Despite Zhou's confident facade, unease simmered within his team. A senior executive, visibly concerned, suggested temporarily halting high-risk operations to avoid further scrutiny. "If we stop now, they'll smell blood," Zhou retorted sharply, shutting down the suggestion. His insistence on full steam ahead raised murmurs among executives, who began questioning how far he was willing to push the limits. Stopping now would be an admission of guilt. We keep moving. Under mounting pressure from Marks and constant surveillance at Finexium, Kane wrestled with his decision. Sleepless nights were spent poring over documents, weighing the consequences of exposing what he had found. Ultimately, he agreed to help the journalist. In a bustling cafe in downtown Dubai, Kane arrived early, his eyes darting around the room, scanning for anything suspicious. When Marks arrived, he hesitated briefly, gripping the flash drive tightly before handing it over. "This is everything I could access without raising alarms," he said, his voice low but trembling with anxiety. "This is just the beginning," Kane added. "If this gets out, Finexium collapses. But you need to understand, they won't go down without a fight." Marks nodded, recognizing the gravity of the moment. "They always fight. But that's how the truth comes out." A few days after their meeting, a detailed exposé surfaced in a renowned Dubai financial publication. Titled, "Behind Finexium's Façade," the report outlined a trail of transactions linking Aurora Consulting and Helios Network to suspicious multi-billion-dollar transfers. Complete with detailed charts and leaked emails, the exposé revealed how these entities laundered funds through layers of intermediaries before disappearing into offshore accounts. Regulators now had concrete evidence to act. Though Kane's name wasn't mentioned, the information pointed to an insider at Finexium. Inside Finexium, chaos erupted. Zhou knew the battle had begun, and this time the enemies weren't just regulators or competitors. They included someone within his own empire. How will Zhou respond to the accusations and uncover the traitor in his ranks? Will Kane manage to protect himself while uncovering more evidence? What will the SEC's next move be following these explosive revelations? Victor Zhou was at the eye of the storm, yet his confidence remained unshaken. After the damning report leaked, he called an emergency meeting with his top executives in a lavish boardroom atop Finexium's Dubai headquarters. The tension was palpable. "Someone is trying to destroy what we've built," Zhou began, his gaze piercing each person at the table. "But we will fight back. First, we categorically deny all allegations. This isn't just about Finexium, it's about the future of cryptocurrency. Our industry threatens the traditional financial system, and they'll do anything to discredit us." As Zhou spoke, some heads nodded, but others revealed unease. Alistair Vaughn, one of the executives present, remained silent, carefully observing Zhou. Despite Zhou's fiery speech, Vaughn knew the foundation of their empire was cracking. Zhou had a plan. He ordered the rapid transfer of assets to safer accounts spread across jurisdictions with lax regulatory oversight. Simultaneously, he began crafting public statements to bolster his narrative of political persecution. Meanwhile, Samuel Kane wrestled with the weight of his decision to collaborate with Julia Marks. The leaked report had placed Finexium under intense scrutiny, but it also made his position within the company increasingly precarious. At work, Kane noticed subtle shifts. Colleagues avoided eye contact, and he was called into routine meetings that seemed more like surveillance check-ins. More alarming was an unannounced update to his computer, something he recognized as a common tactic to limit access or install monitoring software. Marks, maintaining discreet contact, urged Kane to keep gathering intel, especially on Zhou's next moves. "The leak was just the beginning," she said during an encrypted conversation. "We need something concrete to bring this entire operation down." Inside Finexium, suspicion was brewing. Zhou ordered internal audits to identify the source of the leak, but the results were inconclusive. Paranoia spread, and executives began to eye each other with distrust. One figure, Richard Lane, Finexium's compliance director, came under scrutiny. Lane was known for his loyalty to Zhou, but rumors swirled that he was negotiating with regulators to save himself. Zhou confronted Lane in a private meeting. "If you've got something to say it now. There's no room for weakness here," Zhou said, his intensity unwavering. Lane denied any involvement, but Zhou knew he needed to tighten his grip on the team. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, notorious for policing financial markets, was now on high alert. The leaked report provided the agency with enough evidence to escalate their investigation. With court orders in hand, the SEC began accessing Finexium's bank accounts and contracts, freezing operations in key markets. Their mission was clear: dismantle what appeared to be a global money laundering scheme at the core of the exchange's activities. Zhou retaliated with public attacks, calling the SEC puppets of traditional banks. His loyal social media following amplified his message, but institutional investors began pulling away. Internally, Finexium's stock took a nosedive, and whispers of insolvency spread. For Kane, the situation had become critical. He knew the internal audits would soon target him. In a late-night call with Marks, he voiced his growing fear. "I don't know how much longer I can hold on. If they find out, I'm finished." Marks was firm. "You have something they don't, the truth. The more they try to cover up, the more you can expose. We need one final push, Kane. Something that directly ties Zhou to the illicit transactions." Taking a high-stakes gamble, Kane used his credentials to access the company's backup files, a restricted area housing old, often overlooked data. There, he found what could shift the balance. Direct emails from Zhou authorizing transfers to the Helios network, with explicit instructions to maintain discretion. This was the smoking gun Marks had been waiting for. Kane knew handing over these files would deal a crushing blow to Zhou, but it would also mean burning the last bridge to his former life. He encrypted the data onto a secure device and arranged a clandestine meeting with Marks. Meanwhile, Zhou was preparing for a press conference. He knew the SEC was closing in, but believed he could weather the storm. To him, it was all a power game, and he considered himself a master player. But deep down, Zhou felt the weight of the cracks in his empire. Every decision seemed fraught with risk, and he couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that someone within his circle was betraying him. Will Kane deliver the evidence before Finexium uncovers his actions? Can Zhou regain control, or will his paranoia be his downfall? How will investors and regulators react to the next revelations? The Finexium press conference was anticipated as a decisive event. Victor Zhou, ever confident, stepped onto the stage amidst a barrage of camera flashes. His carefully crafted speech blended optimism with defiance. Cryptocurrencies represent freedom, innovation, and independence. The accusations we face are a ploy to protect entrenched interests. We will not back down, Zhou declared, drawing applause from his most fervent supporters. But the real storm was brewing far beyond his grasp. Samuel Kane and Julia Marks were in a secure location in Dubai, meticulously reviewing the files Kane had collected. These documents, emails, financial reports, and transaction details directly implicated Zhou in illicit activities. Marks was finalizing a dossier that had the potential to bring Finexium's empire crashing down. The next morning, as Zhou basked in the spotlight of his conference, Marks's dossier was published by one of Dubai's most respected media outlets. The headline was devastating. The Finexium Empire documents reveal global-scale money laundering and corruption. The impact was immediate. Regulators across multiple jurisdictions froze Finexium's assets as politicians and financial analysts demanded answers. The SEC formally launched proceedings, calling the new evidence a game-changer in the Finexium case. In an official statement, the agency declared, "Finexium's practices pose a systemic risk to the financial market and the investors who entrusted their resources to the platform." This announcement captured global attention, mounting pressure on Victor Zhou and his team. Within the company, chaos erupted. Executives began resigning, fearing legal repercussions. Others scrambled to salvage what they could, hurriedly transferring funds or destroying evidence. For Victor Zhou, the fall was swift and brutal. Reading the dossier, he realized that someone close to him had betrayed his trust. His inner circle was fracturing, with everyone more focused on self-preservation than saving the company. Zhou attempted to counter the leak with an urgent interview, showcasing simplified charts and statements from allies. "This is nothing more than a malicious attempt to discredit innovation," he asserted, his tone oscillating between confidence and defensiveness. Analysts noted his evasive responses, carefully avoiding the specifics of the allegations. Behind the scenes, Zhou pressured his legal team to challenge the authenticity of the documents, while frantically restructuring financial flows to bypass new sanctions. Yet, for the first time, he appeared cornered, almost desperate. For Kane, the moment of victory was bittersweet. He had taken a monumental step toward justice, but the personal cost was immense. He knew that once his involvement was uncovered, his life would change forever. Watching the media frenzy unfold on television, Marx reminded Kane of the importance of his safety. "Zhou might not know who you are yet, but when he finds out, he won't stay idle. We need to get you out of here." Kane agreed, beginning preparations to leave Dubai while Marx worked to secure his legal protection, ensuring his cooperation with regulators would be recognized under a whistleblower agreement. Despite the mounting pressure, Zhou still had cards to play. He activated connections in other countries to move large sums of money, even as his assets were frozen in major markets. He also hired an aggressive legal team to challenge the allegations, prolonging the legal battle and attempting to discredit the dossier. Zhou turned to his base of supporters, many of whom viewed cryptocurrencies as a fight against the system. Without naming Kane directly, he accused him of being a plant hired by competitors to destroy Finexium. This narrative gained traction on social media, dividing opinions between those who saw Zhou as a guilty mastermind and others who considered him an unjustly persecuted hero. The definitive turning point came when the SEC announced the seizure of additional documents that corroborated Marx's dossier. The evidence was irrefutable, and Zhou was formally charged with leading a money laundering scheme that funneled billions through Helios Network and Aurora Consulting. Knowing his time was running out, Zhou disappeared. Unconfirmed reports suggested he had fled to a country without an extradition treaty, taking what remained of his fortune with him. With Zhou on the run, Finexium collapsed like a house of cards. Frozen accounts and offline systems left millions of investors unable to access their funds. News of suicides linked to the financial losses shocked the world, while small investors flooded online forums searching for answers or someone to blame. The global cryptocurrency market took a sharp dive, prompting major exchanges to tighten security measures to avoid a similar fate. For many, the Finexium crisis marked the end of an era of unchecked euphoria and the beginning of unprecedented scrutiny. Regulators intensified their oversight of other exchanges, while politicians debated new laws to prevent future scandals. For Kane, the sense of justice was mingled with profound loss. He had challenged an empire but paid with his stability and anonymity. Now, in a secure location, he waited for the investigations to unfold, trying to rebuild his life away from the spotlight. Will Zhou maintain his freedom in exile, or will authorities eventually catch up to him? Can Kane find peace after exposing the truth, or will the ghosts of his decisions haunt him forever? Will the cryptocurrency market recover from this blow, Or will a new era of regulation reshape it entirely? The collapse of Finexium sent shockwaves through the global cryptocurrency market, triggering a crisis of confidence. Smaller exchanges faced massive withdrawals as institutional investors reevaluated their stakes in the sector. A storm of uncertainty descended, driving sharp drops in the prices of major cryptocurrencies and sparking heated debates over regulation. In Dubai, the narrative reached historic proportions. Politicians were forced to reconsider the laws that had transformed the country into a haven for financial innovation. Meanwhile, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, emerged as a beacon of hope, lauded by the public for its role in bringing down Finexium. The fallout from Finexium spared no one, but small investors bore the brunt of the devastation. Heart-wrenching stories flooded the news. A young man who gambled away his college fund, a family that lost a lifetime of savings, and retirees whose futures crumbled overnight. Protests filled the streets, with banners demanding justice and anguished faces calling for accountability. Lawyers scrambled to organize class action lawsuits, hoping to recover at least a fraction of the losses. From ambitious youth betting on crypto to fulfill their dreams to retirees seeking alternatives to traditional finance, the victims were countless. Online support groups began to form, offering victims a platform to share frustrations and seek solace. Legal teams assembled class action lawsuits against Finexium. But with Victor Zhou on the run and the company's assets buried in offshore havens, the chances of recovery looked grim. Victor Zhou vanished from headlines, but unconfirmed reports suggested he had settled in a haven known for sheltering white-collar criminals. Allegedly, Zhou lived in a discreet property fortified by a network of private security and lawyers ensuring his safety. Meanwhile, he remained connected to offshore accounts and shadowy cryptocurrency networks, retaining access to remnants of his fortune. Despite his tarnished empire and reputation, Zhou wasn't ready to disappear. He reportedly confided to an associate, "The world will always need visionaries," hinting at plans to re-emerge under a pseudonym and rebuild. For whistleblower Samuel Kane, the aftermath was deeply personal. With Julia Marx's help, he fled Dubai. But his new life was overshadowed by uncertainty. Living under legal protection, Kane faced constant fear of retaliation. He often questioned whether his decision was worth the cost. He had done the right thing morally, but at the expense of his stability, identity, and security. Anonymity brought isolation that sometimes felt unbearable. Yet, anonymous messages from victims expressing gratitude gave him moments of peace, reminding him that his revelations had spared others from even greater losses. Though he lost the stability of his career and cut ties with friends and family to stay safe, Kane found solace in unexpected ways. Some Finexium victims reached out to thank him, their words affirming the positive impact of his actions amidst the chaos. The cryptocurrency market, though shaken, began to rebuild. Regulators worldwide introduced new laws mandating greater transparency and accountability for exchanges. While some critics argued these measures clashed with the decentralized ethos of crypto, many acknowledged their necessity to restore trust. Simultaneously, new startups emerged, pledging to learn from Finexium's failures. The tragedy became a cautionary tale, but also paved the way for more responsible innovation. Julia Marx became a celebrated figure in investigative journalism. Her work exposing Finexium was hailed as a triumph of responsible reporting. Despite facing legal threats and smear campaigns, Marx remained steadfast in her mission to uncover the truth. She continued to support Kane, maintaining regular contact and encouraging him to see his actions as a catalyst for positive change. As the world grappled with the fallout of the Finexium scandal, the case became a symbol of both the promises and perils of cryptocurrency. It ignited debates about ethics, innovation, and the fine line between freedom and accountability. For Kane, Zhou, and everyone involved, the case was a turning point, an expose of the shadows lurking in the corridors of global finance. Will the Finexium case lead to effective regulation, or simply create new avenues for manipulation? Will Zhou rise again with a new scheme, or will he remain a fugitive forever? Can Kane find peace and rebuild his life after the storm? Months after the Finexium scandal, Samuel Kane was living in a new country under a protected identity. His life had undergone a radical transformation. Leaving the corporate world behind, he started working discreetly as a financial consultant for small non-profit organizations, helping local communities structure their finances. The work gave him a renewed sense of purpose, but Kane still bore the weight of the choices he had made. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, helping him cope with the constant anxiety and trauma of potentially being exposed or pursued. Despite the challenges, each small step toward rebuilding his life reassured him that his sacrifice had been worth it. Victor Zhou remained an enigmatic figure, even in exile. Occasional reports suggested he was reorganizing, reaching out to business partners, and searching for ways to stay relevant in the shadowy underworld of financial dealings. Some speculated that Zhou might launch a new cryptocurrency-related venture, while others believed he had abandoned his ambitions entirely. Zhou himself stayed silent, but the persistent rumors of his return kept regulators and former associates on edge. For Julia Marks, the Finexium case was a turning point. She became a prominent voice in investigative journalism, advocating for greater transparency in the financial sector and inspiring a new generation of journalists. Marks published a book detailing her investigation and the global impact of the Finexium scandal. Titled Digital Shadows: The Collapse of Finexium, the book became an instant bestseller, funding new investigative projects and solidifying her reputation. She used her growing platform to champion Samuel Kane, emphasizing his courage and moral conviction in the face of extraordinary circumstances. Despite this, she respected Kane's need for anonymity, carefully avoiding any exposure that might compromise his safety. The fall of Finexium triggered profound changes in the cryptocurrency market. Regulators worldwide introduced stricter laws, mandating regular audits, increased transparency, and compliance with international financial standards. While some investors and companies abandoned the sector altogether, many adapted to the new rules, viewing the reforms as a necessary evolution. Fresh startups emerged, promising responsibility and ethics as they sought to regain public trust. The Finexium scandal left lasting scars. It became a landmark case, frequently cited in debates about ethics and innovation in the financial world. For Kane, the legacy of the case was twofold: a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, but also proof of the profound impact of individuals brave enough to challenge those forces. Gradually, Kane began reconnecting with his family and friends, carefully explaining that his distance had been for their safety, without divulging the harrowing details of his experiences. He found solace in the simplicity of his new life, enjoying the quiet moments far removed from the chaos of Dubai. Although fears and uncertainties still lingered, Kane allowed himself to envision a more peaceful future, one where he no longer had to constantly look over his shoulder. What lies ahead for Kane as he begins to rebuild his life? Will Zhou find a way back into the financial world, or will he remain in the shadows? How will the cryptocurrency market continue to evolve in the wake of the changes brought on by the scandal? Samuel Kane felt the crushing weight of every step he took through the ethical and dangerous labyrinth his life at Finexium had become. The internal tensions within the company were reaching a boiling point. Victor Zhou, increasingly paranoid, demanded absolute loyalty and took drastic measures to isolate his inner circle. Finexium, once a symbol of centralized innovation, now resembled a besieged fortress. In the compliance department, analysts noticed abrupt changes in financial flows but were discouraged from asking questions. Kane, however, continued his secret investigation. He discovered that Aurora Consulting, already exposed as a key component of the scheme, was merely one layer of the problem. A new name emerged: Solaris Investments, an entity based in Central America that appeared to be the final stop in the money laundering process. Kane uncovered evidence of substantial transfers ending up in accounts tied to Solaris before disappearing completely from the global financial radar. Meanwhile, Zhou ramped up meetings with his lawyers and financial strategists. He knew external investigations were closing in dangerously on his network. In a private meeting, Zhou unveiled a new strategy to fortify the empire. He ordered the immediate transfer of all liquid assets to decentralized exchanges and anonymous wallets. If we go down, it'll be because of a technicality, not because we got caught unprepared, he declared in a tone oscillating between authority and desperation. Behind the scenes, tensions among Zhou's accomplices began to surface. Richard Lane, the compliance director, grew increasingly nervous. He realized that while Zhou's actions aimed to protect the company, regulators' scrutiny would inevitably fall on him. Rumors circulated that Lane was negotiating a cooperation deal with the authorities. Sensing the tension, Zhou acted swiftly. He initiated an internal restructuring, demoting Lane to a symbolic position without access to strategic information, while reassuring other executives that he was eliminating weaknesses from the system. Outside Finexium, journalist Julia Marks continued to expand her network of sources. She obtained additional documents from a former employee confirming fraudulent contracts tied to Solaris investments. But what she truly needed was a direct link connecting Zhou to these decisions. Kane, under pressure from Marks, hesitated to share more data. He knew that the deeper he got involved, the greater the risk of exposure. "You're already in the middle of this, Kane," Marks said in a coded call. "If we don't see this through, Zhou wins, and the people he's harmed will never see justice." Within Finexium, events were accelerating. Zhou announced a major investor meeting in Dubai, ostensibly to calm nerves following the initial leaks. He planned to use the event to unveil a new product, a blockchain system even more opaque and resistant to tracing. Internally, this move was seen as a desperate attempt to regain trust, but also as a diversion. During the event's preparations, Kane noticed an unusual pattern. Zhou had hired an external consultancy to review the company's systems, a move completely out of character. Upon investigation, Kane discovered the consultancy was a front to destroy internal data and stall regulators. The Dubai event was a lavish spectacle, attracting investors from around the world eager to hear Zhou's promises. On stage, Zhou radiated confidence, pledging a new era of decentralization. But behind the scenes, tension ran high. Kane managed to access a restricted area, where he found employees shredding documents and disconnecting servers. This was more than a delay tactic. It was a full-blown cleanup operation. After the event, Kane returned to the office, only to find his system access completely revoked. This confirmed Zhou and his allies had begun suspecting him. Realizing time was running out, Kane used a personal laptop to access backups he had secretly created weeks earlier. Among the files were internal communications directly linking Zhou to orders given to Lane and other executives to facilitate transfers to Solaris. This was the connection Marks and regulators needed. Before he could leave the office, Kane received an alert on his phone. Suspicious activity had been detected on his account. Zhou's monitoring systems were active, and Kane knew his position was untenable. Determined, he erased all traces of his access and left the building unnoticed. Marks received the new documents the following morning. She immediately recognized their value, but also understood the danger of publishing them without protection. With help from international contacts, Marks began devising a strategy to expose the Solaris scheme. She knew Zhou would respond swiftly. "This is the final piece, Kane," she told him. "After this, there's no way they can escape." Within Finexium, Zhou started to realize his circle of trust was crumbling. Senior executives began resigning, some negotiating immunity deals in exchange for information. Despite this, Zhou maintained a public facade of strong leadership. He prepared an aggressive statement for social media, once again accusing regulators of being jealous of Finexium's success. The stage was set for the final showdown. Kane knew his safety was at risk. Marks faced mounting pressure to time the exposé perfectly. And Zhou, though outwardly composed, could feel the noose tightening. The fate of the Finexium empire hung in the balance. The morning in Dubai began like any other, with skyscrapers shimmering under the scorching sun. But inside Finexium's headquarters, chaos reigned. Urgent communiques from international regulators flooded the desks of executives. Kane, now officially locked out of the internal system, was hiding in a modest downtown apartment, anxiously awaiting word from Julia Marks. He knew the dossier he had handed her would be the final blow. That afternoon, Marks published her exposé. The headline was damning. Solaris, the final puzzle piece in Finexium's money laundering empire. The report laid bare the global money laundering scheme masterminded by Victor Zhou and revealed contracts signed by him detailing transactions through Solaris investments. The publication included charts, confidential documents, and emails that irrefutably proved Zhou's direct involvement in the illicit operations. The fallout was immediate. Regulators across jurisdictions acted swiftly, freezing Finexium's assets in dozens of countries. Local authorities raided the company's Dubai headquarters, seizing documents and devices. Yet Zhou was nowhere to be found. He had vanished before investigators arrived, leaving behind an empty boardroom and a still-active laptop displaying incomplete financial graphs. As investors scrambled to withdraw their funds from exchanges linked to Finexium, Zhou resurfaced online. In a live broadcast on social media, he attempted to defend himself, calling the accusations fabricated lies by governments and traditional banks to stifle innovation. "This is a war on financial freedom," he declared, appealing to his loyal followers. But the torrent of evidence against him rendered his words powerless. Meanwhile, Samuel Kane, realizing it was only a matter of time before Zhou discovered his betrayal, began planning his escape. He knew Zhou wasn't just a skilled manipulator, but also someone deeply connected to the financial underworld. With Marks's help, Kane secured a discreet passage out of Dubai, leaving behind a city that had become the epicenter of one of the century's biggest financial scandals. Back at Finexium, paranoia reached new heights. Executives once loyal to Zhou turned on each other, scrambling to cut deals with authorities. Richard Lane, the compliance director, approached regulators in exchange for protection, providing a trove of documents that detailed the company's evidence destruction protocols following the Dubai fiasco. His testimony finally linked Solaris, Aurora Consulting, and the Helios network, exposing them as mere fronts for laundering billions in illicit transactions. Zhou, now a fugitive, relied on his network to move large sums of money before they could be frozen. He used shadowy intermediaries to transfer assets to decentralized exchanges and countries without extradition treaties. But his trust in one accomplice became his downfall. Pressured by investigators in another country, the intermediary revealed Zhou's location in exchange for immunity. Regulators shared the intel with local authorities, and in a coordinated operation, Zhou was finally captured aboard a luxury yacht anchored in international waters. The news of Zhou's arrest exploded globally. Images of the magnate in handcuffs, escorted by authorities, spread rapidly. He looked defeated, a shadow of the confident leader who once rallied crowds about financial decentralization. His first words to the press were predictable. "I'm a scapegoat. This is a conspiracy." But his narrative had lost all credibility. Inside Finexium, the collapse was complete. Employees abandoned their posts, leaving offices deserted. Institutional investors, who had once backed Zhou, issued public statements condemning his practices and pledging to cooperate with investigations. The company's downfall sent shockwaves through the global cryptocurrency market, prompting major exchanges to tighten compliance policies to avoid any association with the scandal. For Kane, the climax was both liberating and terrifying. From his new undisclosed location, he watched the empire that nearly consumed him crumble. Marks kept him updated on the developments: Zhou's arrest, the plea deals signed by former accomplices, and the market's reaction to the scandal. However, Kane knew his battle was far from over. In his initial depositions, Zhou began implicating others, insinuating that Kane had been an active participant in the scheme before turning against the company. While the evidence provided by Kane cleared him of wrongdoing, Zhou's accusations cast doubt among those following the case. With Zhou in custody, the crackdown on his remaining allies intensified. Authorities traced hidden assets in offshore accounts, recovering a portion of the embezzled funds. The legal process promised to be long and complex, But for Finexium's victims, it was a step toward justice. The climax had ended, but the ripple effects of Kane's actions and Zhou's downfall would echo for years. As the financial market adjusted, the world witnessed a rare example of how even the most powerful empires could collapse when the truth came to light. With Victor Zhou in custody and Finexium's empire in ruins, the cryptocurrency world spiraled into chaos. For weeks, headlines were dominated by the scandal's fallout. Regulators worldwide seized the moment, pushing for stricter laws to oversee crypto exchanges and cross-border transactions. The collapse of Finexium heralded a new era of scrutiny in the digital finance sector. Legal proceedings against Zhou and his accomplices began swiftly. In an initial hearing, Zhou attempted to deflect blame, accusing regulators, institutional investors, and even Finexium employees of sharing responsibility for systemic failures. But the evidence uncovered by whistleblower Samuel Kane and investigative journalist Julia Marks proved damning. Documents revealed that Zhou not only knew about the illicit activities, but orchestrated them with precision, using a web of shell companies to hide billions in offshore accounts. Prosecutors described him as the mastermind behind an unprecedented global money laundering scheme. Meanwhile, Samuel Kane was living under a new identity in a secure location. Having cooperated with authorities in exchange for legal immunity, he delivered the critical evidence that brought down Zhou. But his life would never be the same. Isolated from public view, he spent his days quietly rebuilding his career. The emotional toll of his actions haunted him, though he found solace in messages of gratitude from Finexium's victims. Julia Marks, however, emerged as a rising star in investigative journalism. Her relentless reporting on the Finexium case earned her international awards and the opportunity to publish a book about the scandal. The Cost of Decentralization, The Fall of Finexium became a bestseller, praised for its gripping account of the company's collapse and its sweeping social and economic implications. Marks became a beacon for uncovering financial corruption, cementing her reputation as one of her generation's most respected journalists. The financial fallout from Finexium's downfall was catastrophic. Countless small investors lost everything, their savings wiped out overnight. Heartbreaking stories of personal ruin surfaced in the weeks following the collapse. Support organizations sprang up to assist victims, and class action lawsuits were launched against the company, though the recovery of lost funds seemed unlikely. Still, the scandal served as a global wake-up call. Competing exchanges began implementing more transparent practices and strengthening their compliance frameworks. Some, wary of meeting the same fate, shut down operations in poorly regulated jurisdictions. Although the cryptocurrency market took a significant hit, analysts believed the upheaval would ultimately lead to a stronger, more reliable foundation for the industry. Victor Zhou, awaiting trial, maintained a defiant stance. Through his lawyers, he issued rare statements claiming he was a victim of political persecution, but his reputation was beyond repair. Even the staunchest decentralization advocates began questioning his motives. The Finexium scandal left an indelible mark on the global financial landscape. It exposed the vulnerabilities of a booming sector and served as a sobering reminder: no empire, no matter how innovative or lucrative, is above ethical accountability. For Kane, Marks, and everyone involved, it was a lesson in the cost of courage and the fragility of power when confronted by justice. Finexium's story would be remembered for years as a stark warning about the perils of unchecked ambition. It underscored that without responsibility, even the brightest financial revolutions can be irreparably tainted. The downfall of Finexium wasn't just a collapse, it was a reckoning. Months after Finexium's dramatic collapse, the financial world was still grappling with its aftermath. Victor Zhou, now awaiting trial, remained a polarizing figure. To some, he was a misunderstood visionary. To others, the embodiment of unchecked greed. Samuel Kane lived a secluded life, but found purpose in volunteering, educating small communities about the complexities of financial markets. Meanwhile, Julia Marks had become a beacon in investigative journalism, inspiring a new generation of reporters with her relentless pursuit of truth. The Finexium case reshaped the cryptocurrency landscape, ushering in stricter regulations and sparking vital ethical debates within the industry. Yet Zhou's shadow lingered, a haunting reminder of the profound damage unbridled ambition can inflict. If you believe in exposing the hidden shadows of the financial world and want to uncover how massive schemes can affect millions, subscribe to our channel. Here we dive deep into the stories behind the biggest scandals, revealing what powerful corporations would rather keep buried. Like this video, share it with those who need to hear this story, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Together we can shed light on the secrets of the global financial system and inspire real change. Your support is crucial in helping us bring you stories that unravel the mysteries and dangers of corporate power. Join the movement today. This story is a work of fiction. While inspired by real events and widely discussed issues in the financial sector, all characters, companies, settings, and incidents are entirely fictional and created for narrative purposes. Any resemblance to actual individuals, companies, or events is purely coincidental. The goal of this narrative is to educate and entertain by exploring ethical, economic, and social issues in the financial world. We make no direct accusations against any real entity or individual. Names, locations, and events have been deliberately altered to ensure creative freedom and avoid implications about real-world figures or institutions. For factual discussions on finance and regulations, we encourage you to consult reliable, verified sources.